Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hamilton Report. Today is Monday, the 15th day of March, the Ides of March. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, your host for this evening, and I'm grateful that you decided to spend some time with us here. You know, there's so much happening that I'm so glad that we have our guest that we have tonight, because she does tremendous work and she always does a great job, not just on this program, but every day in her career. Before I introduce her, I just want to make this comment. Oklahomans are under attack. We are under attack by our legislators. We are under attack by our congressional representatives. Our congressional folks all voted, every one of our congresspersons, every one of our senators voted against the relief package. Their made-up reasons were crazy, given how many Oklahomans supported this effort. We need this effort. And thanks to President Biden, we now have it. But again, that is without the help of a single one of our so-called elected representatives in Washington, D.C. It's a shame. It's a real shame. And it's going to be the business of the Oklahoma Democratic Party to let everyone know how these folks turned their backs on everyday, hardworking Oklahomans. It's not just in Washington, though. It's also here in our state legislature. That's why our guest tonight is so important. She is someone who has joined us one other time on this broadcast. And I always tell you how this is one of my favorite times of the week. And that's because I get to spend some time with good folks just like you. But it's also because the guests on this broadcast always make me smarter. And tonight's guest is certainly one of those people. Tamya CoxTour, the executive director of the ACLU-Oklahoma. Tamya, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again. I'm really happy to be here and talk about the work of the ACLU.
You know, I began this program tonight by saying that we are under attack. This is crazy town at the Capitol this year. Some of the proposed legislation, the way that people are acting out on the floor, threatening to take someone outside and fight them. And last week, of course, was capped off by talk of colored babies on the House floor. How did we get here, Tamya?
That's a great question. And it's an unfortunate question because the truth is, I don't know. And Scott, I would be remiss if we did not just name that there has been an attack on just racial equity. This last week, it definitely started with the slur that was used on the House floor, on the People's House floor by Representative Bowles, but it also ended against our children in Norman High School basketball team getting ready to play a game and having to hear, thankfully not at the time, but later on having to hear those words. And so people that were watching it. So I'm really just wanting to honor the trauma and the whatever any Oklahomans, specifically Black Oklahomans, are feeling. I want to know that they're valid and honor that. But to your question, how did we get here? We are seeing an alarming number of bills this session that go against what I believe, everything that's supposed to be what we stand for. We know we've seen tremendous anti-abortion bills make their way, but we've seen a lot of what we've been calling anti-protest bills. We know that these are a direct result of the uprisings that we've seen this summer, and a direct result of those that are fighting for Black equality and against police brutality. And it's unfortunate, but the truth is Oklahoma, regarding some of these anti-protester bills, now keep in mind, these are happening across the country, but what we do know for our national office is that Oklahoma has more than any other state. And that's a problem, and that's unfortunate, but that is the world we are living in right now in Oklahoma. We are seeing bills from requiring a permit to burn the flag. And no matter how we deeply held feelings and beliefs we have for the flag, we have constitutional law and we have enough legal behind it to know that that's against the First Amendment. We have a bill that we saw recently that went through last week that would provide immunity for a person that would drive through a protest, that would intentionally drive through the protest. And the truth is, we had that happen in Tulsa this summer during the uprisings. And what we do know is that the driver wasn't charged, even though we know people were hurt. So the idea that we need a law to give immunity is really unfortunate.
And that law, Tamya, it talks about fleeing a riot, but there's no indication of who defines what a riot is.
I think that's such a great point, is that the moment becomes an unlawful assembly. But usually I think in our experience, it is a police officer or whoever's in charge of the police or law enforcement at the time that deems that. But we also have to remember this summer during the uprisings, we had a curfew that was declared when people were already protesting, when people were already engaging in their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble. A curfew was issued. So there was no notice. So the moment that curfew was issued, even though people did not know, that was an unlawful assembly, And so what is really the heart of it? What we do know is that Republicans, conservative legislators, essentially this is the backlash from the uprisings and from the protests. And that's a shame. We all have a right to express our First Amendment, and they are trying to challenge that at all costs.
This is, if it were the other way around, people would be screaming holy murder. And the fact that they are actively working to take away rights that are guaranteed to us by the United States Constitution is a horrific waste of time and money at the Capitol. These things cannot stand up in court, but that doesn't stop them from, just carrying on with their little protests in the Capitol.
I think that's a great point. And, you've had me on this great show before, and I think I've said it, but I'll say it again, is that I've been lobbying for the last 15 years. And thankfully, ACLU has amazing staff that is handling all of our policy work. And I will say within that time, we've definitely seen an evolution where the threat of litigation was enough, or just exposing how unconstitutional a bill was enough. But that is not where we are right now. Legislators are more emboldened to go against the freedoms that we hold closely. And until, we find different tactics of ensuring that we're protecting our civil liberties and civil rights, this is the legislature we're going to see and have to live with.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about criminal justice, because this is an area I know that you folks are watching very, very closely. It's also one of the pillars of the House Dems platform this legislative session. What can you tell us about what is being done to not reform the criminal justice system in a positive way?
No, I think that's such a great point. We have legislators and even a governor who appeared to be very criminal justice reform minded. And maybe that was a year or two ago. But what we know is that the legislation that is currently out there, that is making its way, is not showing true reform. We have bills that are trying to roll back our state questions that tried to really alleviate and decriminalize and get folks out of the incarceration system, with the people passing many of these, the state question 780s. But we have bills right now that are trying to roll those back. We have bills, we really went with the motto this year of no new fines, no new crimes. And really associating that what we do know is that fines and the money attached to some of the charges that people are receiving is so astronomical that even when they plead out in some form or fashion that does not lead to criminal or does not lead to incarceration or less time, because the fines are so extravagant, we see people going back to jail simply, or the incarceration, because they can't afford it. We know that if we were able to reduce fines in some form or capacity, that it would greatly increase the well-being of people. People are choosing between paying their court fees or putting food on the table. And that is not an exaggeration. That is not something that we're just saying. Like, that is the truth of it, is that fines are just so much that people are really making those decisions. And for people, some people like me who have been fighting for women's equality for so long, what we also know is that this puts such a hinder to that work. Women, because of the world we live in, women are definitely the primary caretakers of families, of children, of elderly parents. So when they are within this justice system that we currently have, and they are removed by being incarcerated for their charge or being incarcerated because they can't pay, that has a negative impact on the family unit. That has a negative impact on children's or elders' lives. And we really have to talk about criminal justice reform in a different way. And unfortunately, we're just not able to talk about it right now with this legislature.
And as you were talking, I couldn't help but think, Tamya, that every bit of this is also a racial justice issue.
For sure. We hear this buzzword, and many folks like me and you, we've heard this, and we've been saying this for a long time, but really the intersectionality of it all. We don't live just these one, issued lives. And it all impacts from reproductive justice to racial justice, to LGBTQIA2 spirit justice. Like, it's all related. And until we are continuing to find ways to end oppression, and specifically a very oppressive criminal justice system, this is what we get. And we deserve better. Oklahomans deserve better.
Looking at what's before us this year in terms of criminal justice, is there anything that we can hope for to come out of this session that we could look at positively?
Yes, we do have a few great bills out there around the jury kind of bifurcation, where we're able to kind of make it to two different systems. And we're seeing potentially some bills out there around a prosecutorial discretion. Yes, so I don't want to sit here and say that there's not good things happening, but there's just so overshadowed by the bad things that sometimes a lot of us feel, our policy staff, are definitely spread thin already, but are definitely led to, like, how do we fight this bill, as well as have conversations with members about this bill is really bad. However, you have a really good bill, and usually the bad, unfortunately, overshadows the good.
We have a new bill tracker on the Oklahoma Democratic Party webpage that anyone can follow a bill. They can contact legislators directly from the webpage. It's a wonderful way of getting folks engaged. But to your point, it's awfully hard to keep up with everything, and it requires some concerted effort on all of our parts. You have been in the advocacy business probably since you were very, very young, but I know since the time that I've known you, you have been consistent with your advocacy. Here's a picture of you at the Capitol doing what you do best.
Wow.
And it's something that we cannot say enough. Every day when Alicia Andrews, the Oklahoma Democratic Party chair, goes live at 4:15, one of the things that she always says is advocacy works.
Oh.
And teach us how we can become better advocates for ourselves and our families.
I love that. I love that she says advocacy works, because I think there's no truer words. And we saw that advocacy working around a bill that would have prohibited gender diversity and sexual orientation training, that went from really bad to really, really bad to kind of bad to not being heard because of advocacy, because Oklahomans came together, in a bipartisan way and said, you know what, this is not healthy and safe for our kids, for our school kids. So we saw that advocacy works by that bill not being heard. But what I hope, to your watchers to know is that it is a responsibility and a duty for us to be an informed citizenry, like point blank. But also know, like within that, I want us to challenge ourselves to think differently, that being at the Capitol every day may not be your advocacy. Your advocacy can be, tweeting those that are, bosses at social media, as well as just getting the word out, as well as being journalists, showing up to protests. In my mind, I've always just believed, my parents grew up in the civil rights time, so I've heard the stories of the music that happened that changed the course. So the artists out there, the singers out there, they also have a role. And I truly want us to think that it's not just about finding ways to work within this policy, finding ways to work within this system that was created to leave a lot of us out. But how can we really shift advocacy to include like a diversity of tactics? But at the same time, I also have to recognize that we have to play the game. And I go in there when I am lobbying or talking to members, I go in there recognizing that I'd like for us to kind of redo the whole system. But within that, I've got to work within the system. And how do we do that and work together? Advocacy is so important. My favorite quote that people probably have, if they've seen me present, have heard me say, that activism is my rent to live on this planet. And I truly believe that that's our responsibility. And by that's a quote by Alice Walker. What I hope from folks is that they are reaching out to their members, whether they are friendly and they're champions, because your champions need to hear from you as well. People that if you're in a district in Oklahoma City and you have a Forrest Bennett or a Representative Maury Turner or Representative Colin Walkie, or if you're in Tulsa and I have a Representative Monroe Nichols or Regina Goodwin or Senator Kevin Matthews, they still need to hear from you. And I really encouraging viewers to make sure that you're reaching out and just saying, hey, thank you for your words. Thank you for debating. We know that y'all are outnumbered, by huge margins, but you're still centering our voices and our work, and that's important. They need to hear that. But the other legislators need to hear it as well, that you're not representing us, that you are not standing up for the values that I believe in. And my values deserve to be heard just as much as anyone else's.
You mentioned artists, and that really opens a great big door for all of us to find some way to advocate on our own behalf. And I'm so glad you said that, because that's a great entrance for someone who may be upset about something but not really know how to involve themselves. That's perfect.
Yeah. And I think, I feel like sometimes our system's designed to keep people out or designed to not make it accessible for all. But when you have those that are quote unquote thinking outside the box, and I hate that quote because I was like, I don't want a box, but those that are thinking outside of the box, with the art, the street art, the songs of our people, of our elders, and are bringing in our ancestors into these places and spaces, like that's what advocacy means to me. And I just don't want people to think that they have to go to the Capitol, because that's kind of a scary thing for some. Like I said, I've been doing it for so long. I get terrified most days when I had to go up there. But so just really encouraging folks that like we all are part of the solution. And the solution doesn't have to be what's happening on 23rd and Lincoln.
I want to move in a moment, but I just want to say that I love the fact that you're using advocate and activist interchangeably. There was a time when activist had a negative connotation about it, whereas advocate was kind of a skate word.
Yep.
But I love the fact that you're combining the two, because whatever you call it, it's work.
Yep.
And that's I appreciate that so much. Let's look at voter suppression. That's a big one this year. And part of that is changing the way that ballot initiatives get put before the people. Things that it just seems like it's getting harder and harder to have a voice in this process when it comes to constitutional changes, when it comes to honestly just being able to vote.
Right. Yeah, and that's unfortunate. When we see, I have to take that back. I was going to say, when we see other places that are making voting easier, and we're like, nope, that's actually not the case. We are seeing suppression happen throughout this country. And, we have to call it for what it is. We know it was Black women who brought us to the trifecta. It was Black women who brought us to the Senate, who brought Democrats to the Senate, I guess I should say. I guess I need to start with ACLU was a nonpartisan organization. So sometimes I say,
that's right.
I really mean, just it brought like the very social justice minded people is really what I mean. And now that we're seeing the rollback from what's happening in Georgia to here, it is not a coincidence that some of the greatest openings of social justice, whether it was decriminalizing marijuana use, whether it was decriminalizing and legalizing, whether it was ways that we can have better reform the criminal justice system for state questions. It was the action of the people that had caused us this. This did not happen at the legislature. It did not happen at 2030 in Lincoln. It was when the people came together and said, this is what we want. And now that we're seeing that being pushed back, and now we're seeing rollbacks and people and legislators trying to tell us that this is better for voters. Voters are smarter than that. And we deserve better than that. And we should be finding ways to make it easier for voters, all the way to automatic voter registration, like we see in places like in other states, to places like Colorado that automatically mails out your ballot, regardless, like it is automatic. Oklahomans the Oklahoma legislature should be focusing on ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. And specifically making sure that the voices of the people are heard through our initiative petition process, making that easier. Now requiring so many signatures in the different counties, and this again is an obstacle, and we should call it what it is. And what you called it earlier, it's voter suppression.
I think it's SB 33 deals with electing electors. And that would be a major change in the way we do things in Oklahoma.
And please forgive me, because there's been so many. Is that the one that gives the governor the right? Is that one that gives the governor the right to pick the senator, or is this a different one?
No, this is the one that would require the legislature to go into session and then elect to the electoral college.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry. So again, we were one of the younger states, right? If not the youngest, and yet we are trying to change things. And why is that? Is it because even though social justice minded folks may have not overwhelmingly won in this last election, is that why they're trying to change it? I say yes. Is it because we're seeing what is happening in other states when you have a Nevada and an Arizona and a Georgia turn blue? Is that what it is? Let's call it what it is, which is ways to ensure like powerful people keep their power. What I love about young folks specifically, what I love about what we're seeing in other states is that young folks are going to make their way. When you have like Representative Congressperson Cori Bush, when she's coming in hard from St. Louis, and you're seeing The Baltimore mayor, who's a young guy. When you're seeing these young folks come in and say, you can keep your status quo, we're about giving more rights to people, we're about ending oppression. That's what I love. And that's why I think I do this work, is because I get to see the evolution. It's sometimes hard in Oklahoma, as you know, but there's no reason why we can't be and work toward the equity and the equality that a lot of us have been fighting for so long.
Well, you've given us so much to think about tonight, Tamya. It's and I must say again how much I admire you for the work that you're doing. I very much appreciate the ACLU's work in keeping an eye on everything at the Capitol, because we all owe you a debt of gratitude for your work, for your advocacy. And I know that it can be draining, but somehow you always remain energized, and you continue to energize those of us around you. So thank you for all that you do. And let's plan on chatting again real soon. I want to talk to you again as this session nears an end, to see what success we were actually able to make this year.
I definitely hope there's going to be a lot of successes. I will be the optimist that I tend to be. So thank you so much for this platform, for letting me talk to your viewers, and definitely wishing you well, and like to chat when the session's over for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tamya. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Tamya was talking about voter registration and all of the ways that it should be easier. And I'm happy to tell you that the Oklahoma Democratic Party has just made it easier for you to help get family members and friends registered to vote. If you will go to our website, which is okdemocrats.org, right from our site, you can register there, and we will send you a pre-filled out registration form. All you have to do is sign it, put your ID number on there, and you're good to go. We even send you the envelope with postage to send it back in. That's how much we want you to vote, and we're trying to make it easier for folks to be a part of the democratic process rather than more difficult. It's an uphill battle sometimes, and I recognize that, and I know that living in Oklahoma can be a real challenge. It doesn't matter if you're in Oklahoma City or in the Panhandle, if you're in southeastern Oklahoma or Tulsa, wherever you are, there are unique challenges, but we also have some unique opportunities to work together to identify qualified candidates and to share the messages that come from the party, things that people need to know. They need to understand that every day your party is working on your behalf to make life better here in Oklahoma. I want to thank you for your continued support by tuning into this program on Monday evenings. It is a true pleasure and an honor that I don't take lightly that you decide to spend time with us each week. Thank you again to my wonderful guest this evening, Tamya CoxTour. Great work that she's doing. And as I said at the beginning of this program, my guests make me smarter, and she certainly does. I look forward to seeing you again next week right here at 7 o'clock. And let your friends know if they missed this broadcast, they can always see it at okdemocrats.org/YouTube. Thank you. Be well. And on Wednesday, wear your kilt and raise a glass to St. Patrick, who I think would have made a very good Democrat. Have a good evening. We'll see you next week.